Well, good morning, or I guess it's afternoon now. Welcome. My name is Kristin Meeks. I am an instructor for the IMC program, recently teaching audience insights, finishing up this week, and the content marketing. I own a digital marketing company here in West Virginia, and I am so excited for today because I am a former higher education marketer. So I am excited to learn some stuff and hopefully maybe pass that on to some people as well. So first off, I just want to say welcome to the Integrate Online presented by West Virginia University Reed College of Media, which offers renowned online master's degree programs in marketing communications. And, big thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to be discussing the ins and outs of higher education marketing. And we have Jennifer Gish and Jaime Hunt with us today. Just want a quick reminder to go ahead and make sure that your mics are muted, and we will have the chat feature up for any questions at all. And so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jaime and Jennifer and ask them just to do a little bio for us. Let us get to know you a little bit, and then we will jump into some of these great questions we have. So whoever would like to go first.
I'll jump in. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. I'm Jaime Hunt. I am the Vice President and Chief Communications and Marketing Officer at Miami University of Ohio. And I think Jennifer and I have already talked before about how we've had really similar career paths. I started out as a print journalist in Minneapolis and then made the transition to higher education about 18 years ago. I started out on the PR side of things. But in 2007, I got a job at UW-Oshkosh, where I started out as the news director in their integrated marketing communications office. And the marketing director resigned 5 days after my first day, and they didn't ever fill the position. They asked me to sort of just fill in for a while. And I ended up filling in for the whole time. And I decided at that point that I really enjoyed the marketing side of things too. Went and got the IMC degree at WVU and have been working on both communications and marketing at institutions, mostly on the eastern side of the country since then. So I've been at Winston-Salem State University before Miami, Radford University before that, and then UW-Oshkosh and Northwestern before that.
And I'm Jennifer Gish. I am the Associate Vice President of Marketing and Communications at the College of St. Rose. We're up in Albany, New York, upstate New York, about 2.5 hours north of New York City. We are a small private liberal arts college, very well known for teaching and our teaching degrees here, actually. And I do have a very similar story to Jaime. We're both first generation college students as well. I think similar paths as print journalists to higher education marketing. Our years of service are just flipped. I spent about 20 years on the print side as a journalist, both as a writer and an editor, covering pretty much everything, news, features, sports, investigative journalism. And then I left. I came up to Albany for a senior, and ultimately became a senior editor at the newspaper here. And said, if I ever change careers, it'll be for something I really care about, and it'll probably be for higher ed, because I have always appreciated my gift of higher education as a first generation college student. And I very much feel that it is a pathway toward upward mobility and really an important service that we provide communities and students. So got my undergrad at Penn State. I'm a Pennsylvania native, and so I have degrees in journalism and then another degree in women's studies. And then I am midway this summer through the IMC program at West Virginia. So happy to be here.
Great. Well, we have a great two panelists today, and I have some questions for you guys that I'm sure others in the room are dying to know as well. And the first one is my favorite, because I feel like that's the one that as higher education marketers, we struggle with the most. And it's balancing priorities of programs. So everyone thinks their program should get all the marketing dollars, right? So how do you do that? How do you decide which programs get that attention? So whoever would like to start.
Well, I'm meeting with the Dean of the School of Arts and Humanities tomorrow to have this very discussion. So this will be my practice run of that.
Yes, there you go.
When we speak to faculty, we talk a lot about how we are a comprehensive institution. So we have undergraduate and graduate degrees. Our graduate prospective student is very much looking by program, and therefore we often market by program. That's a lot of our digital decisions are made that way. At the undergrad level, we really see it as marketing the entire institution and the experience that it offers undergraduate students. And then if we have programs, and we do have a few that are unique, we will put some extra dollars behind making sure that students know about those, because again, we have less competition around that. So that's sort of how we make that decision. That's not at all popular as a discussion to have with the faculty who are not in those programs that are very unique. But I try to talk with them about how the marketing means a lot of different things. And it doesn't mean just digital ads and billboards and those sorts of things. And so in discussing this discussion with the dean tomorrow, we're going to talk a little bit about this great English department that we have. And we've got a really great lineup of faculty with a very unique approach that ties in with the institution's sort of mission of social justice and multiple perspectives. And so I think, what I want to give to him is that the faculty have an opportunity to do programs with high schools. They have an opportunity to build a summer academy writer in residence program. There's lots of other ways that you can touch undergraduate students and have them be exposed to what you have to offer that isn't necessarily what you may think of when you think of marketing.
Jaime?
Yeah, so I think there's sort of it sounds a little bit crass, but it is which programs are revenue generators are definitely the ones that you focus more marketing attention on. So we have, for example, in our graduate college, we have programs that we actually pay the students to be students here through their graduate assistantships and things like that. And then we have programs where the tuition is market-based and there are not graduate assistantships or TA opportunities. And those programs are designed to bring in revenue for the university. And so those programs are the ones that we prioritize for our marketing efforts. We also tend to talk to our deans and faculty about how our primary function is to market the institution broadly and to market undergraduate recruitment broadly and transfer recruitment broadly, but to think about how that lifts all of the programs. And then when we get maybe the advertisements, the digital ads and those communications are more geared toward the university as a whole, there's opportunities once we start to know more about the student and their interests to send them communications via email or targeted advertising about particular programs that they might have an interest in. So it's not necessarily about spending dollars on that advertising as it is spending the dollars on the top of the funnel. And then as we get to know them better, be able to be a lot more targeted and strategic about how we communicate to them, and giving the communicators that work in those divisions the opportunity to have emails queued up that go to them, and then to continue that through the yield season. So as you admit students and they start to come in and make their deposits, a lot of schools have a May 1st yield deadline where that's their deposit deadline. We start to talk to the students more and more about the different programs and opportunities in the colleges on campus. So I think that kind of helps frame it for people, that notion of if it's a revenue generating thing, that's a thing that we'll spend money on. If it's not going to generate revenue, we just can't justify the overall expense to spending resources on those programs in that way. But there's other ways, like Jennifer said, to market your program beyond purchasing digital ads. Or billboards are a very popular thing that many faculty want billboards and they don't understand. You can't even really measure the ROI there. But there are things you can put UTM parameters on your emails to be able to track if the emails are effective in reaching the right audiences, if they're clicking through. So kind of steering them towards those more targeted communications approaches.
And to piggyback off of what Jamie said about, deeper into the funnel, we have more of those discussions. I've found that when we talk with faculty, sit with departments, talk with them about their program, ask them questions, get their feedback on what maybe adjustments we're making to their program pages on the website, you get fewer of those questions because they feel like you are representing their program and putting kind of best foot forward and their points of differentiation forward.
So many great things there. And that kind of leads to the next thing about, when you're in higher education and universities, colleges, there are certain themes that kind of run through as we're recruiting students and even, donations and things like that, having a social impact, upward social mobility, changing the world through education, which Jennifer, you mentioned a little bit. And so how does your institution find those points of differentiation with that?
That is really, really tricky. There's something like 4,000 institutions of higher education in the country. Everybody has seen like the cliched student with a backpack underneath a fall colored tree, with like the United Colors of Bennington in terms of like the racial and ethnic diversity of the students. I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have. Every institution talks about having dedicated faculty. Every institution talks about the types of experiences that a student is going to have that makes them grow and develop into the adult that they're going to be. And so really sussing out what actually makes you distinctive, it involves spending time talking to people. It involves getting input from all different kinds of constituents. You can't really leave out one audience and then get the full picture of what your campus is, what it does, what makes it distinctive, what makes it great. So my recommendation is definitely spend time talking to people, getting that input, do the research. A really strong brand has to be three things. It has to be authentic, it has to be distinctive, and it has to resonate. So you can have the most authentic, distinctive brand in the world, but if it doesn't resonate, that's not going to do you any good either. So you have to have all of those pieces in place to really be able to make a difference for your brand. But as we're working on a new campaign concept for the university, and all the great ideas somebody's already using. So you have to be really clever and creative, and then do your research to make sure that you are in fact the first one to say it like this, or the only one saying it like this, so that you're not sort of in that lumped in with another institution in that way.
Yeah, a tagline in the world of higher ed, to come up with a good tagline for your brand is like the most difficult exercise in the world, because if you just blindly took a list of them, you'd be stunned at how similar they all are. I mean, we kind of all come back to the same place. I think, not at sort of the top level brand level of the funnel, but a little deeper in when we're talking about enrollment. I think, again, back to those discussions with faculty to find points of difference and distinction are really important. And sometimes you think that they're offering them up, and then you really get into a discussion with them and ask the right questions, and you start to tease out all of this information that you never knew. I don't know if he's on here, but Daniel Gallagher is the enrollment AVP at our college, and he designed a worksheet, and we've done these before, like tell us your points of difference with faculty. But what he did was give them an exercise of, here's 5 other schools I want you to look at that either we cross applications with or we want to cross applications with. Go to their websites, here's a little chart, fill it out, and tell me what your points of difference are. And we had a tremendous results from that. And I think it was very eye-opening to the faculty who were engaged in it, and certainly helped us as we were in the midst of program page revisions and telling the story. So when we get a little deeper down into the funnel, I think it gets a little easier, but at the brand level, it's difficult. I guess it's really looking at your mix. What's your heritage, your mission, your history? Where are you located? For us, we're right in the city of Albany. We're the capital city of New York. So that opens up some exciting opportunities for our students. And it's figuring out how all those things fit together into one unified story about your brand.
Yeah, and I'm sure that has changed a lot over the last couple years too, and you've had to adapt. So, can you guys talk a little bit about how your strategy has adapted with the pandemic over the last couple years?
I think for us, it's a matter of doing more, reaching students in multiple channels, and knowing that different things are just going to hit with different people, which, is kind of the basis of IMC and what you should be doing. But I think more now than ever, you have to be virtual, but not everyone wants virtual. You have to have an amazing in-person experience. You have to go back to print because now they're looking more at print. They want video, they want chatbots, and just sort of being sure you're covering all those bases, which of course comes back to budget. And I do think one of the things that institutions are going to have to grapple with moving forward is that we are going to have to spend more in order to be able to do those things and really reach students. That's not a popular conversation to have at most institutions. But I think and I'm in the Northeast in a private college, so it's tough out here. Nathan Grahl will tell you it is tough out here, and it's going to continue to be tough. And if we want to win that war, we really need to put more funding into making sure we're out there in front of students in every way possible.
I think from Miami's perspective, and I see a couple of names on the call here from Miami who've been part of this, there was a big pivot to more virtual experiences and to supporting and creating those virtual experiences. So I know that the Miami team had a big, heavy hand on creating things like virtual tours and virtual events and things like that. But as the pandemic is sort of tapering off, those can't really fully go away. There are things that students really value and really benefited from. So now it's more about how do we incorporate some of that into the rest of our work. And I have a very insistent phone right now, and I apologize for that. From the marketing spend perspective, I feel really fortunate because our CFO 100% understands that marketing is a value driver and not just a cost center. So if there's an opportunity, if you're still seen as a cost center for your institution, I think there is an opportunity now to kind of talk about yourself as a value driver and that you generate revenue from your office. It's not just a place that spends revenue, it generates revenue. And so I feel really lucky we got a pretty good infusion of cash in the last year that's ongoing funds because our CFO recognizes that we have to do more than ever before at this point. And we know that in addition to the demographic cliff, where we're going to start losing the percentage of students who are, or the sheer number of students who are graduating from high school, college bound is going to decrease. We also saw somewhere between 50,000 to 1 million students drop out of the college experience over the pandemic for a very wide variety of reasons. And so we know we have to be a lot more aggressive and a lot more innovative to be able to attract students, get them drawn to our institutions. And I'm not going to be surprised if we start to see some of the smaller schools who aren't able to be as nimble or to make those kinds of investments start to merge or close, to be honest.
And that's great that you have that internal buy-in. And I have read many things about what you have said about closing or merging. And I think this next question really goes into that, is that we have this external message that we're trying to put out there, and is it aligning with our internal message? And so how do you make sure that those people internally and externally are both speaking the same language when they go about talking about the Institute, and we're all kind of marketing it together?
I think it's definitely being very visible on campus and being deliberate about meeting with people and having those discussions on a regular basis. So I'm meeting with departments a lot. I'm in front of faculty committees a lot. I'm talking about it. I'm on cabinet. I'm talking about it at the cabinet level with all of my division leaders and sharing, what's going on in marketing. We actually we have our employee newsletter that comes out of my office too. We're a centralized marketing operation. So we use that as an opportunity to talk about what we're putting out there and what the message is. And also, anticipate potential controversy with a move we've made, especially to our previous discussion of, well, why don't I get that? Why don't I get that commercial? One example is St. Rose is the leader in New York State in terms of producing graduates in education, both at the certificate, master's, and bachelor's level. And so we're number one. And so it's very important to us to maintain market share and grow that share, actually, because there's still opportunity there. So as everybody was coming back at the P through 12 level to schools, we have 28,000 teaching alumni. And so it was important for us to make them feel appreciated as cultivating our alumni, but also then remind everybody that we have 28,000 teaching alumni and we happen to be the best at this. So we ran a commercial that was sort of a branding commercial, but around education, where, you know, they showed teachers throughout the pandemic. We used our own alumni in it, in their classroom setting, masks on, you know, working, talking to a computer screen and teaching that way. And then had a little girl's voice come in at the end, and she shows up at the door and says, "I'm so glad to see you." And it was kind of a tearjerker commercial, but it was a thank you to all of the educators out there. Now, it was a beautiful commercial. It was a wonderful thing. I don't question our choices there at all. However, I knew that I would hear, why doesn't our program get that? Why are we doing that for education? And so in the employee newsletter, I included an item that let people know that this was coming out, shared it with them so they could see it, and then explained why we were making that decision and what that would do for our alumni and stewardship of donors, what it does for the brand in terms of recognizing this important segment of our community, whether they went to St. Rose or not, and then how it helps the admissions side of the house and enrollment. So I think really just explaining the why behind what you're doing to people does go a long way.
In terms of getting greater alignment here at Miami, there's a couple of things that we've done. We've centralized our academic divisional communicators to be part of our main university communications and marketing office. So they report up to a senior director of academic marketing and communications, so that they're really plugged into what's happening at the UCM level, but we're also getting all the benefit of all of their knowledge, their subject matter expertise, what's actually happening in the colleges, because they're still positioned within their dean's offices. So there's a give and take of information there. Then we also meet every other week with everybody who is the top communicator for their area across campus. And we're working to align our communications plans. And we have this massive spreadsheet, and we've aligned all of the communications plans and connected them to either the priorities or the brand pillars, or both. So how do these fit into the overall university priorities? And then which brand pillar comes to life with these communications? And that has been really, really helpful. And our plan is to kind of continue to build that out and then start to find the synergies. And where are there times where one office is speaking to an audience that another office has a vested interest in? For example, our alumni might be interested in our graduate programs. And so how can we connect some of those communications together and be really, really deliberate about that alignment and make those meetings not just about UCM passing information to the communicators, or even just like a two-way, it's a multi-way, everybody communicating with everybody about what they're doing in their areas, to try to keep that cohesion across communications and keep those brand pillars in people's minds as they work on communications for their specific unit or department. And I think it's been pretty successful so far, and I'm expecting it to just continue to evolve and grow in the next couple of months and years.
That's great. You know, we've talked a little bit about this disruption in higher education and some things that may be coming around the bend and things that we have seen in the past. What do you feel the role of the marketing leader is to help the institution with this changing landscape?
I always like to talk about us as being somewhat ombudsmen for our audiences. So we are, out there, we're seeing on social media, we're getting the emails, we're seeing the feedback. And so we can really advocate for the end user, our consumers, or our constituents, and make a case for changes in policy or changes in practice things that will more benefit those audiences. I think too, being in the C-suite, being at the leadership table, gives us an opportunity to speak into things like pricing, like tuition, discounting, new program alignment. I know that I serve on our Miami Academic Program Incubator, which is where all new programs for both undergraduate and graduate come through to get feedback on their proposals. We talk a lot about the name of the program that they're going to roll out. I'm able to speak into the SEO piece of the name that they're considering changing or adding to their programs. And then I'm also on a steering committee that's looking at like our pricing and discounting. A lot of times in the corporate world, these would just be natural parts of being a CMO. And it's a little bit new in higher ed for CMOs to have that kind of voice at the table. But I think really savvy presidents understand what we can provide and the value we provide and the insights that we can provide that can help them make some of those really critical decisions.
Yeah, I think Jaime said it very, very well. And, I think we're the biggest fans and harshest critics for our institutions. We wear both hats, and that's important because I think sometimes people, they can't have that sort of 30,000 foot view because they're not taking in all the comments that they're seeing on social media or the word on the street and thinking about that, or seeing the roadblocks that students may be running into on a regular basis and how that hurts word of mouth, that hurts retention, and retention hurts marketing efforts, right? So I think it's very important that we're at the table to connect those pieces. I think Jamie's absolutely right. That's not something higher ed was necessarily comfortable with. In the newsroom, it was that separation between editorial and advertising, right? And I think there's the academic and then the marketing administrative separation that we contend with in higher ed. So I think breaking that down is really important. I've seen that people are more open to that than before. Feedback before, when a new program would be formulated at my institution, marketing would be brought into the process when they would come to me and said, how much would it cost to market this program? I need to put a number in this proposal. And so I think that now they're understanding the value of, like Jaime said, talking about like, if we name it this, what does that do in terms of its SEO value or recognition for students, and what other institutions might be using, and how we could either differentiate or align with what students are expecting to see in the name of a program. So I think those conversations are happening more, and I think we have to kind of push our way into those spaces when we're not, in a way that says, I'm here to help your program be successful. I do think in this climate that we're in with the disruption, as Jaime said, institutions are closing. Institutions are cutting programs. I understand when faculty, deans get nervous about their program being marketed because they don't want to be on the chopping block one day if it comes to that. So I think having empathy for that and then approaching it with that empathy is really important to those discussions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad to hear that they're coming to the table, but I have experienced that in other industries too, where marketing is the last to kind of know about what's going on. And so I'm glad to hear that we're being brought to the table maybe a little bit earlier. Maybe you're not, as you're listening to this, and can say, well, these two institutions are trying to do that, and we start working that way. So as we kind of finish up today, I do have a couple more questions, and one of the last ones that I always like to hear about, because I feel like there's just so many different things that you can do in higher education and in the marketing world. And I always like to hear, what do you find is, maybe the question says rewarding, but I always say like favorite part too. And the most rewarding is usually that favorite part too of working in higher education.
I absolutely love everything about higher education. Like Jennifer said, first generation college student, it completely transformed my life. And I think that working with the young, enthusiastic people who are on the cusp of their future, people who have these big, exciting dreams for what they want to do, and higher education is going to help them achieve those dreams. I mean, that's super, super rewarding. from like what the actual work that we do is, that's most rewarding. I really enjoy the issues management piece and the reputation management and trying to solve the problem. We have X problem, X issue. Can we come together and bring some voices into a room to have a conversation about how we can communicate around this in a way that serves our audiences and also brings more voices to the table, brings more input into the table, and also protects our reputation and hopefully enhances it. So that's my favorite part of the job, is that issues and reputation management piece.
You know, my director and I always say that we've picked the hardest thing to market. It's it's really a challenging field. Some days I really do just want to go market yogurt because it seems like it would be easier. But no, I think, again, being first generation and realizing how transformative it was. My mom said to me, if you have your degree, you always have choices. And that is very, very true. And being able to give that to other students, whether they're third generation or first generation, is really important to me. I get energized by the student population and figuring out how to reach them and trying to be current and trying to be fresh and experimenting. We did a augmented reality piece this past year for Yield, a print piece where, you know, you interacted, and I got that from the Living Labels wine app. That's where that idea was sparked. So like having a team that's fun and willing to take risks because you can, because the collateral turns over so much in higher ed, is a really exciting part of the job for me too. And I just got to hire one of my interns today to join us right after graduation, which feels amazing, to mentor and then see someone's gifts and be able to then bring them into the fold is really exciting. So I really love working with the students when we can.
Yeah, Jennifer, I agree. Like I always say, that student that, I don't know, I mean, it doesn't really have to be an age, but that student that's in higher education are some of my favorite people. And I love that. I love that story. So in the last, before we do some Q&A here, where do you see the future of higher education marketing going?
I am anticipating that we are going to need to get a lot more sophisticated and mature our organizations a lot more. I think ROI, measuring ROI, understanding what is the value of the lifetime value of a student, getting much more sophisticated with analytics, I think is part of the future of higher ed. I think that we're in this sort of awkward space right now. And it's weird to say that after 18 years, but when I first started in higher education, it was sort of that old publications office model, where it was like a faculty member would come with a brochure and say, can you make this, like just update this for this next year? Or can you do a press release about this paper I wrote? Now we're needing to hire people with a lot higher level sophistication of skills and a lot deeper knowledge in analyzing data. And I think one of the challenges higher education has is that salaries are based on that old model, and that is not going to work in a new model. And so I think as leaders, we have to look at opportunities to help make a case for higher salaries for our staff, make a case for, honestly, remote work so that we can recruit for some particularly very technical positions where people have the whole country to choose from for employment. And I think we're going to see more remote work, particularly in IT and IT adjacent marketing jobs. But I'm hoping what that means is that we're going to start to get more sophisticated with the IT and IT adjacent things. And we're going to be able to have a much greater look at our funnels, much greater look at how our technology integrates, break down some of the silos that exist. I cannot be the only higher ed marketer that has, 4 or 5 different instances of our CRM on campus. Can we get a much more sophisticated CRM that's really breaks down silos? So I just think the future of higher ed marketing is going to be a lot more reliant on technology and a lot more reliant on innovation and a deeper skill set in those areas.
Yeah, I agree with Jamie in terms of the data analytics and the technology. I think the students are expecting such a personalized experience. Like the days of just like your name and the subject line of an email are gone. I mean, they want the content they are seeking delivered to them specifically. And so our ability to analyze and segment and then deliver the messaging is going to be so critical moving forward to building those connections with students. So they can then be handed off to the admissions office and hopefully have a deeply personal, engaged, relationship with their admissions counselor as they go through the process. I think salaries, I just had that argument this morning with this new hire, are really important because as you're looking for those data analytics people, they're out there in the world earning much more than higher ed is willing to pay them. And we need to understand what an important investment that is on the part of the college in those people with those skill sets. And that comes at a price. That's part of the price of marketing. So I do think that's very important. I think we are combating a very divided attention span and a very limited attention span on all the way through now. It's not like it's just the 17, 18-year-old prospective undergrad student. It's all of us because we're multitasking and we're looking at clips of things all the time. I'm a TikTok fan, so I like my information in bites. And so being able to synthesize a message down to those very few seconds to grab someone are going to be more and more important. And that's why I'll make a case for hiring journalists. They're very good at distilling information and driving right down to the point. So hire your former journalists, everybody.
I co-sign that message.
Well, as two former journalists, right? You have to, right? Yeah, I agree. I think it's happening everywhere. What I'm seeing, just not in higher education. We've got to get those salaries up. We've got to let them remote work. One of my favorite stories to tell is talking to these marketing departments pre-COVID and them going, "Oh no, never. I would never let them remote work." And I said, "They're leaving because you're not letting them remote work." And then all of a sudden we're all remote working and look, the world did not end. Marketing still happens. So there is a lot to still, come forth with higher education, but you two are definitely out there spearheading it for the rest of us. And I love it. And maybe one day I'll get back into it full time. But until then, I love listening to this and I appreciate you both today. I do think we have some time for some questions. So I'm going to look at the chat. So feel free to ask any questions if you have them. And I'm just going to go back and through here. Lisa mentioned outcomes are a huge marketing tool. If there's any comments there with that. Partnerships, which, I think we can agree with that. That is important. There was a mention about the incubator concept. I really thought that was interesting as well. If you want to talk a little bit about that, I think he had some questions about a market analysis done to determine whether to even have that program.
Yeah, we have a partner that does an analysis of whether there is a audience for a program. So it looks at the hiring trends, what are the degrees, a whole bunch of stuff goes into the algorithm, and then it spits out a score. And that score tells us what number of students we could anticipate would register for the program if we market it at a certain level. And there have been programs that have actually spit out a negative score, that we are not going to be able to sell this program. There is not enough demand for it. I know that part of the algorithm is looking at our geographic location. So if you're maybe trying to spin up a fashion design, Southwest Ohio might not be the very best market for that. So it takes that into consideration. And then we get these full proposals where we can look at how are they projecting that they would talk about the program in a distinctive way. And so we're able to speak into that a little bit and then give them recommendations about a budget for marketing, recommendations about a name for the program. And then from there, it sort of incubates a little bit more on the budget side. And when it comes out, we have known about the program since it was a baby program. And so we're able to then be more on the inside track for marketing it when it's time.
And I'll add to that. I think one of the important parts of having marketing at the table early in program development is also asking the question, and it sounds like, Jaime, the formula that's used by the company you work with hits on this, but like, does it make sense for our institution? Like, are we actually, like, yes, there might be demand for this program, you know, yes, even in our region, like the competition is slim, but like, are people going to associate your university or college with this area at all? Because if not, and you still want to go there, you have to help manage the expectations of leadership that a program takes a while to seed. Because we've had instances where, you know, programs will be proposed and they're like, oh, well, we're going to have this ridiculous number of students within a year, and they're launching in like June and expect it for the fall. And you have to, you know, help to manage that a little bit, particularly with programs where if it's kind of new to your brand associations, you have to, that's going to take a couple of years at least.
Keisha has a question here. It says, any insights on innovation ways to incorporate student communicators and student marketers into your work and operations?
We use student workers. We just started using interns more in a formal way with our comm department this last year. I really love to have them engaged in creating content, particularly in the social realm. You know, in our TikTok, we're allowing students to drive a lot of that. You know, student takeovers on Instagram and those sorts of things. I think they're really important to being authentic. I try to get them to look at pieces we're sending too for their feedback, because sometimes we might just miss with photography choices or color. Even, you know, we're introducing some additional colors into our palette, you know, and really, is this fresh? Is this what kind of speaks to you as a student? So I think engaging them and asking them their thoughts is really important, and then letting them drive a little bit. And it might not feel comfortable what they want to do all the time. As long as it's appropriate, take the chance.
I love it.
We work with students in similar ways, but we have this one thing that we just kicked off, and it's sort of a pilot. One of our students who's a sophomore started a business where he does social media consulting, and he approached us and made a pitch for his business to manage our TikTok account, to start with building followers and then start to build content for that. And so we just got from him, I think yesterday, his proposal for how he's going to do that. The fee is about what you would pay a student worker if they worked in the office, but he's running it through his company. So it gives him some experience with running a business, managing employees, managing cash flow, all of that, while also giving us this content from students that's a lot more authentic and I think more true to the TikTok app in terms of what people expect to see on TikTok. So I'm going to be really interested in seeing how this pans out, and if it's a good, viable way to move forward with having students engaged in that platform.
Oh, I love that. We've been talking a lot about TikTok over in my realm of the world, so I will definitely have to follow you guys on TikTok there. Looks like we have another question. Former journalist and trying to get into higher education, communication and marketing world after finishing the IMC program this week. Well, congratulations on finishing the program. I'm curious as to what your biggest pain points and challenges were in your transitions. Are there things that you could have made the transition process easier or smoother?
Deadlines. I live and die by deadlines. I love deadlines. I need deadlines in my life, and I need everybody to adhere to my deadlines. And that is not, higher ed does not traditionally move at that speed. And sometimes you might have layers for certain communications. They have to go through some layers in order to finally make it out there into the world. So I think that was definitely my challenge, sort of, and knowing, like, you know, 365 days a year, I used to put out a newspaper. Like, didn't matter what happened, like we could do it. And sometimes that means not holding on to something and trying to make it perfect all the time. It means, you know, is it correct? Great. Is it necessarily the very best story it could ever be? Maybe not, but there's another one tomorrow. So I think getting people to sacrifice the, you know, perfect for the good sometimes in order to just keep going, because there is so much content we need to produce in order to reach all of these different audiences. So definitely it was the pace. It was the pace that got me. I didn't slow down, but everybody else slowed me down a little bit on certain things.
It's so funny because it's been 18 years since I was a journalist, but I still feel like the word deadline has the word dead in it for a reason. Like you're supposed to hit the deadline, like it's a deadline. And I hadn't really thought about that until you said that, Jennifer. Definitely the pace. When I was a journalist, I was churning out, 6 to 10 stories a week. I was busy, just constantly interviewing, writing, turning around a story in 45 minutes. And so this sort of leisurely, like, I need to think on this copy, all of that is still 18 years later, sort of foreign to me. Like, yeah, we do need to think about it, but like, we need to go. So I think to Jennifer's point, like that urgency, I also think for a lot of people who are coming to higher ed, particularly if you're trying to move into a leadership role in higher ed from outside higher ed, whether it's journalism or something else, it can be a real shock to the system, the shared governance piece, where faculty have a lot more say in things versus like at a corporate entity, like maybe it's the CEO and the CMO and they make a decision and they go, and you're not having to get as much buy-in. I like having more voices at the table, but that can definitely be a harsh transition. And I know several colleagues who came into higher ed and then bounced right out after a couple of years, like, nope, this is too hard, which is ironic because all of the people who I know who came into higher ed from outside were like, it's going to be so much easier. And I just sit here and laugh because it is not going to be easier at all. But
I've
it's going to
definitely
be
Googled
great.
and laughed more in this moderation than ever before because I remembering all the things. This next question though is one that I always ask all my students because I'm just curious essentially is that, this person, who was that here? Nicole said, you guys are both very established in your careers. What made you want to start the IMC program?
So for me, it was having come as a journalist into PR and then sort of taking on the marketing piece too, that I thought I needed to have more of an education in marketing. And the office was actually that I came into was the Integrated Marketing Communications Office was the name of the office. And that was still relatively new in 2007 for higher education to be looking at it from that perspective. So I felt like the IMC degree would really help me to be a part of that office as a contributor and to help me build the knowledge that I need across the gamut of communications. So it isn't just marketing, it isn't just PR, it's all of those things working together. And I use things I learned in the IMC program every single day.
And it was much the same. It was coming from a certain background and really feeling like if there are deficits here, I need to know, and I want to go in and kind of fill in knowledge. I think a lot of things coming from journalism to marketing are kind of intuitive because you're thinking about audience all the time. You're thinking about story, but learning how to do a brand matrix, really helpful. So I think like you pick up these tools that really help you do your job a lot better. And so I'm midway through, like I said, almost midway through. I love it. I love looking at other brands and just getting my head out of the higher education world. So the timing was right for me because it's helped me think differently about what I do here and then adjust accordingly. So it's fantastic. So if anyone's out there who's a prospective student on here, I highly recommend it. I am 45 years old and was terrified to go back to school after this long hiatus, but it's very manageable and the faculty in the program are incredible and the format's incredible. So I can't say enough positive things.
Yeah. And Jennifer, you really say what I always tell people is I want people to take my class and be able to like implement it like the next day. And I do feel that happens. And I've heard so many great stories with that. So I love both of your stories there. So another question here, and I do think we're okay. I'm trying to keep us on time too. I don't want to get in trouble for that. What tools, CRM, social media management tools, etc., do you use that you would consider essential to higher education marketing or have been working well for you?
you want me to go first? Okay, I'll go first. Somebody mentioned it in the comments about customized view book. I'm a big fan of that. We do use custom view book. It allows the student to engage personally, and there's a lot of great back-end information that you get on the student, so you can kind of see where some hot leads might exist and what their behavior and engagement was. So, I mean, that's one tool that I found to be very helpful. We use a lot of the same social media management tools that a lot of others do in terms of Hootsuite and things like that. Our CRM, I think we're in a transition period, so I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that, but a good CRM is important, very important, and it's going to be more and more important, as Jaime alluded to, moving forward.
Yeah, much the same answer as Jennifer. Sprout Social for social media. Our CRM is Slate. We use that. We're using Tableau for getting our data analysis. I'm sure there's tons of other software. We are using Rike as a project management tool to help manage projects within our office. Really, I think the absolute bare minimum is some sort of social media management tool and some sort of CRM and some sort of email communication tool that maybe connects with your CRM if possible, if it doesn't come with that.
These are both general workflow, but we Slack, because as much as I can take off email, my goodness, do it, because your team at least wants to be talking to each other that way, even if you can't get anybody else to adopt. And then Zyflow is a proofing tool that we use that changed our world. When I got here, there were PDFs floating around email, and it was a nightmare. And so we can proof websites in there, we can proof video in there, we can proof print pieces in there. And I found that to be really, really helpful in just tracking comments, making sure all the changes are getting made, and really keeping projects on task.
I think that's the big shift that I've seen is the project management. I think with the integration of digital, you have to have a project management tool or a project manager or somebody to keep us all on task there. Another question we have is talks about starting to see students more interested at the undergraduate level on programs. I think this is probably they're researching a lot more is what I would think versus the overall institute. I know generally we've seen that people are researching more now than ever before any kind of decision is made. So have you guys seen this shift in consumer behavior, and do you think it's a permanent shift? This is what this question's asking.
I'm not sure if I've seen a big shift in this. I think that majors and programs have always been one of the top things that students search for and look for on the website. More where I've seen a shift is in what students want from college. So I think Gen Z is much more interested in entrepreneurship and in having side hustles and other types of ways to earn money that are beyond a traditional 9-to-5 job. And so I think have seen a bigger shift in, we don't necessarily want to hear about how many of your graduates get jobs. The parents want to hear that. The students are a little bit more interested in the experiences that they're going to get that will maybe help them achieve their side hustle and entrepreneurial goals. And I think that Instagram and things like social media has really played into that. Like they want an Instagrammable college experience versus like I just want the piece of paper. So I think that there is still a persona that is in it just for that outcome. But I think that there's an increasing number of students who are in college for the experience of college more than just getting that piece of paper at the end.
And the person who asked that question works with me, so he already knows what I think.
I love that. Yeah. I'm like, this is making me think so good. This is making lots of great thinking going on today. And I think that's what the IMC program tries to do, is tries to get all of us together and get us our wheels turning for other things. Another question we have here from Kimberly. I love your thoughts on how your central teams work closely with teams in advancement as well as enrollment. Who owns that and at which point in their respective target audience funnels? Yeah, I think I read that correctly.
We're centralized, so it just flows through me anyway. I'm very connected with both. They don't have their own, really comm teams that comes through my office. So what I love about that is it allows me to connect their purposes. Like Jaime talked about that spreadsheet and how you connect the different activities. It very much allows me to say, oh, you're trying to do this with alumni. We're trying to do this with, the enrollment side. Like, how can we create a piece of content that really kind of serves these needs and tells the story in a way that might benefit you both? So that's kind of the way we do it, is that because we're centralized, it really allows us to be keeping both divisions in mind.
So we have not centralized advancement yet here at Miami. So we've centralized the academic communicators, but not the advancement communicators. But I do meet with the VP of advancement and the AVP for advancement communications every other week, as we're talking about aligning our institutional brand with their capital campaign launch, so that we're in sync on that. And then the AVP for advancement communications is part of that group that meets every other week, that's trying to align around communications planning, KPIs, metrics, and all of that. So I have touch points with those folks basically every week, whether it's the meeting with them and the VP, or if it's that bigger meeting that has all of the directors of communications in it. And I think that's just really, really important, because advancement is an important part of revenue generation for the institution, and it is an extension of your brand. And so having that synergy, I think, is absolutely critical.
Great. Making sure I'm not missing any questions here. I think we got one more, unless somebody else jumps on here. How important do you think community building is in the existing student body, and what tools do you use to do that in terms of marketing to prospective students? I think student testimonials, but do you see other ways that may be important?
Yeah, I think that's really an overlooked piece of the communications on campuses, is really highlighting on a regular basis our current students, making them feel engaged and part of things. So, especially on social, we do a weekly student newsletter that goes out through email called In the Know, but then we also have a social Instagram story that goes with it to just keep them engaged with news. And we try to celebrate great student events there, and really, make them feel a valuable part of our community is really important. The trick sometimes, and they often get overlooked, is graduate students. And I think we need to do a better job for them to make them feel also a part of our community, and valued as well, and seen on our campus. So that's just, our challenges as an institution.
So here at Miami, current student communications actually doesn't fall in my shop, but one of the directors is part of that group that meets every other week to get some alignment. At a previous institution, we saw it as really, really a critical audience. So when I was at Winston-Salem State, it was a really important audience for us to keep our student engaged. And one of the things that we were starting to roll out around a little before I left was doing Instagram lives for big announcements. So we were having bringing in a DJ, they were having a dance party on Instagram, and then bringing in the provost to talk about how is registering for a class going to be different this semester because we've made some sort of change. And then people could ask questions, and it was emceed by the DJ. It was a really interesting way to go about things, but we were finding so many more students were participating in that way than if we had a town hall where you're just going into a Zoom that looks like this. And there's no yay party. I really hope they're still doing that. I honestly don't know if they are, but I think that was one of the more innovative ways that we were trying to get information to students to help them retain, not get frustrated with their experience, understand some of the decisions that were made in a way that was a little bit untraditional.
Yeah, I think your integration with TikTok may get you guys moving that direction as well. So let's say one more question here, and then we'll, or maybe a couple here, and then we'll wrap it up. How involved is your administration in the development of your marketing messages, especially the day-to-day operations?
So I would say and I see some faces on the call from my shop, so I'm not sure if they'll agree with me on this, but I would say on the day-to-day, we're relatively autonomous. we have relative autonomy. In terms of the overarching university brand, there's definitely a lot of speaking into that from the president and other PEC members, which is, I think, important. I'm a big believer in more voices at the table, bringing people into the conversation, not just from a getting different perspectives, but also from the point of view of getting buy-in for what you're doing. So I think it's important to have those voices early in the process.
And I would say the same. I mean, it's that level. The engagement is really important because you need the buy-in. Someday you might be coming asking for more money for your activities. And so if they know what you're doing and have had a say in it, that helps with the buy-in as well. So
We'll do one more question here and then we'll wrap it up. So we don't go too far over the 1 o'clock. Do you outsource any parts of your communication or do you complete everything in-house?
we are going to be outsourcing a little more. When I came here, there was an agency of record. We brought that all in-house. That was quite an undertaking, but it allowed us to it was just smoother for what we needed to do and have a little more control over the messaging. We will be outsourcing a few pieces. I think when you're and I really feel for the person who posted this comment, I get it, bandwidth and of your staff. And I think you really have to get some agreement with your leadership. What are our priorities? What are the must-do things for the marketing office? And then you're going to have to say no to some people or think of some shortcut ways, templates, whatever you need to do to kind of push away those other requests because you don't want to burn through your staff either. So if you have the budget in order to be able to outsource some things, choose to do so. And if you can't, you're going to have to prioritize and triage and say no sometimes.
Yeah, I think we actually outsource quite a bit of things. We are currently outsourcing our communications to prospective students in the digital advertising. We're working on bringing that back in-house. I think part of the reason why we want to do that is to have more control over the messaging, more control over the data, because when you're working with the vendors, sometimes they get a little bucky about giving you the data, which is really, really frustrating. They don't give it to you the way that you want, or they give it to you too late. So we're moving some of that in-house. Right now, the vendor we're using does our creative for our undergraduate recruitment, and we're bringing that back in-house. Nobody understands our brand to the depth that we understand it, and nobody is executing it as well as we execute our brand. So those things are important. Things that I think are great candidates for outsourcing, things like setting up your digital campaigns and buying digital across, that's a big time consuming thing. And to try to manage all of that internally would take quite a few people with a lot of expertise. Other things that I think are good for outsourcing are things that will be like a one-time thing. If you want to do some sort of like a campaign concept, we're working with an outside agency to help us develop that, but then we will be refining it and doing the execution of it. Brand research, things like that, I recommend outsourcing that stuff. There's just some really specialized skills that you're not going to use over and over and over again, that you're going to use maybe every year, every couple of years, that I think those are the good candidates for outsourcing.
That's great advice. Well, I want to finish up here and just say, I think we had a great lively discussion on higher education. I learned a ton. I'm sure others did as well. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and a special thanks to Jaime and Jennifer. I want to make sure that you know where you can find more sessions like this, which is integrate.wvu.edu. There's recordings there of previous episodes. You can subscribe to make sure you don't miss another one, as well as check out the in-person conference this year that I am extremely excited about, Integrate 2022. It's a great way to connect and learn from the best of the industry. Some of the stuff that was mentioned today, I've heard in the past at conferences, so that made me excited. If you are interested in attending that conference, visit integrate.wvu.edu. and you can register there. And then also do not forget about the one-time IMC Higher Education Communications cohort that is starting fall of 2022. And if you haven't want to learn more about that, It's go.wu.edu/IMC-hire-ed. So again, thank you everyone for attending, and I've had a wonderful afternoon and have a great week.